At 9 years old, he read the entire Encyclopedia Britannica.
Not for school, not for approval, because the world outside his window in Pretoria, South Africa, felt too small for the questions in his head.
Elon Musk was born in 1971 into a household that was, by his own later accounts, difficult. His parents divorced when he was young,
And he stayed with his father, an engineer whose relationship with Elon he would later describe as painful.
School offered no refuge either. He was bullied badly, at one point hospitalized after being thrown down a flight of stairs.
So he retreated into books. Science fiction, physics, computer manuals.
Isaac Asimov Foundation series planted an idea in him that never
Left.
Civilizations rise and civilizations fall,
And someone has to think far enough ahead to stop the fall.
By 12, he had taught himself to code and sold a simple video game called Blaster for $500.
It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the proof that a mind, alone in a bedroom,
could build something out of nothing. South Africa in the 1980 seconds was not a place built for Musk's ambitions.
Apartheid-era mandatory military service loomed. He wanted out specifically. He wanted to reach America.
The only place he believed could support the scale of what he imagined.
At 17, he left for Canada using his mother's citizenship.
Working odd jobs shoveling grain in a lumber mill,
Cleaning boiler rooms before.
eventually making his
Way to the University of Pennsylvania. It was there, and shortly after, that the first real opportunity appeared.
The early internet was exploding, and almost no one understood its commercial potential yet. Musk saw something most people missed. Businesses needed to exist online, and almost none of them knew how. In 1995, instead of finishing a PhD at Stanford, a program he abandoned,
After only 2 days, he and his brother, Kimball, started a company called Zip2, building web software for newspapers and city guides.
it was a bet with no safety net, no wealthy backers, no family fortune,
Just a small office, a handful of employees.
and a belief that the internet was about to change everything.
What Musk didn't know yet was that Zip2 would make him his first fortune, and that the way he handled that money would set the
Pattern for the rest of his life. In 1999, Compaq bought Zip2 for over $300 million. Musk's share was roughly $22 million, more money than he'd ever imagined at 27 years old.
Most people in his position would have slowed down. Musk did the opposite. He poured almost all of it around.
$12 million into a new venture.
An online banking startup called X.com.
It was a staggering risk. He wasn't protecting his winnings. He was reloading the gun.
X.com merged with a rival company to become PayPal, and Musk became its largest shareholder. But success inside the company didn't mean security. In 2000, while on his honeymoon, Musk was ousted as CEO by his own board, a boardroom
coup born from disagreements over technical direction and leadership style.
It was humiliating. It was also instructive. He learned, early, that control matters as much as capital, and that being right isn't the same as being trusted by the people around you. When eBay bought PayPal in 2002 for $1.5 billion,
Musk's stake came to about $180 million. He now had something rarer than money, the freedom to gamble everything on the ideas that mattered most to him. So he did something almost no one expected.
he didn't buy a mansion or retire.
He funneled the fortune into two industries considered nearly impossible to disrupt.
Rockets and electric cars.
SpaceX was founded in 2002 with a goal that sounded almost delusional: reduce the cost of space travel enough to eventually make
Mars colonization possible.
The aerospace establishment scoffed.
Rockets blew up. Literally, SpaceX's first 3 launches failed.
One after another, draining Musk's remaining capital. By 2008, he was down to his last funds.
Personally bankrolling both SpaceX and a struggling young company called Tesla at the same time. Friends worried he'd lose everything. He later admitted it was
The most psychologically brutal year of his
life, sleeping on factory floors, missing his children's birthdays, watching 2 companies teeter on the edge of collapse simultaneously.
Then, in the final months of 2008, everything hinged on one launch. SpaceX had one attempt left before running out of money entirely. If Falcon 1's 4th launch failed, there would be no 5th.
On September 28, 2008, Falcon 1 reached orbit.
It was the first privately funded liquid-fueled rocket ever to do so. Days later, NASA awarded SpaceX a $1.6 billion contract to resupply the International Space Station, a lifeline that saved the company.
That same December, Tesla closed a critical funding round just hours before running out of cash. Musk had bet his entire fortune on 2 impossible industries, and both had survived by the narrowest possible margin. What followed was a transformation few predicted. Tesla, once dismissed as a toy for wealthy environmentalists, became the company that forced the entire auto industry to take electric vehicles seriously. SpaceX went further, landing reusable rockets, a feat many aerospace veterans had called physically implausible, and eventually launching astronauts to the ISS on American soil for the first time since the space shuttle's retirement. Musk's wealth grew into the hundreds of billions, making him, at various points, the richest person alive. But the fortune was never the interesting part. What made him a singular figure was how he used influence, acquiring Twitter in 2022 and reshaping it into X, pushing into artificial intelligence through XAI, and positioning himself for a period inside the US government's efforts to overhaul federal spending. Each move expanded his reach. Each also multiplied the controversy around him, and the controversies are real. Volatile public behavior, labor disputes at Tesla factories, erratic statements that have moved markets and at times invited lawsuits. Critics argue his political involvement blurred lines that shouldn't be blurred for someone with his commercial power. Admirers counter that no one else was willing to risk everything twice on problems the rest of the world had written off as unsolvable. Both things can be true at once. What Musk's story ultimately reveals isn't a lesson about rockets or electric cars. It's a lesson about capital allocation as psychology. He treated every fortune he earned not as a finish line, but as ammunition for the next impossible bet, accepting the real chance of losing it all, more than once, because the alternative was never trying. The rockets will eventually be forgotten by history. So will the cars. What won't disappear is the principle underneath them. Fortunes are not built by protecting what you have. They're built by risking it deliberately on the problems everyone else was too afraid to touch.